It knocked the wind out of me, and it brought every fear and insecurity right at my doorstep. I couldn't hide from it anymore, and I had to face planning my future, a whole new future, and it was scary.
Welcome to Yana TV, Dr. Anuradha Rao. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Yana. I'm so happy to be here as well.
And tell me, where were you born, please?
I was born in India, in a little city called Mysore in South India. But I grew up moving around because my dad had a government job, so we moved every 3 years. So I'm like a global nomad.
That sounds familiar. It's my life for the last 20 years.
Right.
How does it feel to be a global nomad from a very young age?
You feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, but you also don't fit in perfectly anywhere. So it's a combination.
Yeah, I wonder how it then impacts our personality later. I guess this is what we're going to talk about today. And then what brought you to Singapore?
I came here in 2008 with my then husband and my 1-year-old baby girl. And we came from Dubai. And I followed him. It's the term I don't like, but it's called a trailing spouse. And I hope that they change that term. But I came here and I found that I didn't have a job. And so then began that next journey of finding my identity in Singapore.
Yeah, trailing spouse, it's a really strange way to put it. And I can relate to this because I also came to Singapore as a trailing spouse. And usually it means that you have no life and your husband has life. Yeah. And then so what happened next? So you arrived to Singapore with your 1-year-old baby and your husband, and then what happened?
And then I just began to miss working because when I was in India, I was working in the nonprofit sector. I worked on public policy. I was on the ground. We're talking about citizen awareness. I couldn't find that job in Dubai, and it ate away at me. And then I came here and I couldn't find that job here. But then I got a scholarship to NUS. And so I started my master's, and it gave me an identity. And it was tough because I was studying after 7 years. But I realized I'm a nerd and I loved it. And my supervisor told me, hey, I've already done a master's, so why don't you upgrade to a PhD? So I worked.
That's right, doctor.
That's right, doctor. I can't cure medical ailments, but I'm really proud of the doctor that I have. And yeah, I worked hard and I got the PhD from NUS, and I called myself the reluctant academic, but I'm so glad I did it.
Please excuse me if this is a personal question, but I know a little bit of your story, and I feel that it is important to share with people because it also helps us to understand each other better. So then what happened within the family?
I realized that the PhD really took a lot out of me, and I think it impacted my family life. We weren't able to find that right kind of balance between my husband's work. He was always traveling. My PhD, I was teaching. I had a 1.5-year-old, and things were really busy. So I don't think we got quite the right mix. My marriage fell apart in 2018. And it's been another adventure since then about reclaiming identity and figuring out who you are after being with someone for 16 years. It's been a different journey.
It must have been really not easy. And it's interesting. I know quite a few women in Singapore exactly in this situation. So when they come here as a trailing spouse, usually with children, and then something happens and it's different things for different families. But then the divorce happens and a woman is here, usually with kids, trying to figure out, so what do? Do I go back to the country where I was born? And so to me, it is beautiful that you are actually have been rebuilding your life here. So tell us about that.
Oh, thank you, Yana. It is tough. And I got married at a young age. I was 23 when I got married.
I got married 21 when I was married. Like baby.
You grow and mature over time, but it's just your identity is so hitched to the person that you're with that it becomes difficult to know who you are. My journey has been, who am I? Like I started thinking about this at 39 years old when I was separating from my husband. And it's difficult because you're joined together for so long. And it's been more about self-love. I didn't really quite know what that was about. Not being with someone out of fear or anxiety, but more of that you're there for each other, but you don't need a person in that more desperate sort of way. So that's been my learning.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that as women, we can like relate so much to how we're merging with our partners. And I think there is this joke. I'm not sure how funny it is, but let me tell you, when two girlfriends come together and go to the juice bar, and one of them has been divorced twice.
Right.
And so her girlfriend turns to her and asks, so what kind of juice do you want to drink? And she says, well, with my first husband, I was drinking orange juice. With my second husband, it was tomato juice.
Right.
Now that I'm divorced twice, I'm not sure what juice I like. And I feel it's just so much exactly who am I?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful journey. I'm sure with the research and studies, this was where you have been channeling your energy and, trying to make things like a sense of things and building back things. Tell us about your work.
Yeah, so I love my work. I work in the area of cybersecurity awareness and cyber safety, which basically means I work to keep you and me and anyone who has a digital device safer, healthier, and happier as they're online. I started my company in 2019 because, again, it's part of that journey of going through the divorce. And I wasn't happy with the work I was doing. I loved it. I was working at university. I've been at NUS since 2009, but I didn't quite fit there. And I wanted something where I fit. And I thought that that was with me, with my own company. But I still work in academia. I teach, I do research supervision, I do workshops at universities in Singapore, but I have my own business now, and they both tie into each other. It's all about making people aware of the dangers online, because we're online all the time, but do we really understand what the dangers are?
So since the technology is evolving more and more, and now we are going into AI, which is the whole other level of what technology can possibly do. And I feel as people, we haven't figured out the safety yet, even for the like social media and all other things we are sharing. So maybe share with us what people should be mindful of.
Right. I think one of the most important things is we need to be mindful of what information we're giving about ourselves, because we put so much of ourselves online. Simple things like images, our children's images, where we study, where we work. And you may be wondering, how is that dangerous? It's dangerous because cyber criminals or the bad guys out there will piece together information about us and use it to hack into our systems or to build trust with our loved ones and then either scam them or hack into their devices. So we need to be mindful of what about us we really want the whole world to know and what we want to keep a little more private.
And so how do we decide that, especially in the current world where there's an encouragement from branding gurus and marketing gurus that you have to show your personal life and no one just wants to see you only as a professional. It's too boring, it's too dry. So people want to know who your family is because it has this human touch and relatability, right? So how do we keep this balance?
Now, that's a great question, Yana, because I think life is all about balance. And it's the same in the cyber world. I mean, a simple thing is how much of your, say, children's images, for example, would you want out on the internet? So that's a simple thing. You want to make it private? Do you want to make it public? For example, on my LinkedIn, I post a photo of me and my girls maybe once or twice a year, and that's it. And I'm more mindful that I don't want their information, for example, known to the wider world. And so you can choose privacy settings. But for those people who've decided that they really want to be open with their personal lives, just to be mindful about how much of their information, like, do you need to tell people where your children are going to school, for example, or when you're going on vacation so that your house may be empty? So I think it's about balance, just to be mindful that every time you give out information, what are people taking from that?
It's very interesting. I have a 19-year-old bonus son, so I know him, he was 4, so I'm like his second mom. And so he's the generation of kids that I think all of us thought they're going to be constantly on social media, that because we are sort of constantly on social media, so we thought they're going to be even more. And it's very interesting for me when I watch him and his friends, they are all either using something like Snapchat, which is for friends only and disappearing messages, right? Or if they use Instagram accounts, they're all private.
Right.
And it's more for communication and exchange of messages rather than just posting about their own life. So it's interesting how I find the next generation goes through this other wave where we probably have been way too exposed online. We released so much information about ourselves that, of course, now it's just very easy to put together fake news. It's very easy to do pretty much anything because there are so many images, videos and pictures of people and voices that you can put together pretty much anything about anyone.
That's right.
But then, like our kids, they very different. And so that just has been my observation, at least. I don't know how about your children.
I agree that our generation is the one that we haven't had any formal training about technology. It was just thrust into our lives. And see, that's my background. My PhD is in communications and new media. And my research was looking at the benefits and limitations of new technology on our lives, right? So I went at it from the angle that there's always a negative impact, and we have to be mindful of that. That's why my work focuses on people in our age group or our generation as parents or caregivers, because they don't know enough. We don't know enough. So that's why I focus on them rather than children, because children are learning this. They're learning this in school. They're learning this as part of their general awareness. At the same time, though, our young ones still need us to be there for them, because there's a lot that happens within these closed groups that isn't healthy either. So we still, whether it's as a parent, I would still say be there with your child, understand how they use the internet, and be part of that journey with them as much as you can, because they know more than us, but they still don't know enough.
I'm going to ask you now just a few questions about lessons in your life. What was one experience that you feel really impacted and created you the way you are today?
I think that would definitely be my husband and I separating, because like I mentioned earlier, it knocked the wind out of me, and it brought every fear and insecurity right at my doorstep. I couldn't hide from it anymore, and I had to face planning my future, whole new future, and it was scary. And I think the learning has been shit happens, if I can say that. And you just got to pick up the pieces. It's sink or swim. And so I decided I would swim because my girls need me. And I think it brought about a feeling that I am strong.
You have daughters.
I have 2 daughters.
And so it's interesting then, of course, as a mom, of course, you're becoming their role model.
Yes.
So they're looking at you and you going through the separation and rebuilding your life as a woman. It's also an interesting example of strength and resilience and courage and just trusting yourself. So I find it's really beautiful then to show them that, just as you said, things happen in life. We can never predict it. But then whatever happens, you can always pick yourself up, and it's always a choice. How did you do that?
I think it's a combination of things. One was I have a great family. My sister lives here in Singapore with her family. My parents rushed from India, and they were there for me in those first initial really difficult period to help me say, hey, we're always there for you. So it was understanding that others have your back and you don't have to do it alone, which I was trying to. So, lean in and ask others to help you out. And I had built a great community of friends and professional relationships, and everyone was just there for me. And it's reciprocity. I was there for them when they needed it, and suddenly they were there for me. So that was another learning, just build up this circle of trust, of friendship, and then it was just learning new skills, putting aside fear. I'm an anxious person by nature, so it was very anxiety inducing, but I think I did a combination of those. I started meditating a lot. I focused on my health and well-being, and I think that combination of those things got me through.
How is it different for you to have your life in India versus Singapore, for example, right? Because you grew, or maybe in Dubai, because you were moving around with your husband. So given that you're here in part of the world in this particular country, so how does that impact the situation?
Singapore is the one place that I've lived the longest time in my life, 15 years. So I guess you probably understand this as well when I say that it's such a welcoming place. It's easy to settle here to any of the other places in the world I've lived in. And I think if you put in that hard work, you do find avenues to be rewarded. Plus, it's safe. And having lived in India, where you're more fearful of personal safety, this kind of frees up your mind to be able to do other things other than focus on yours or my children's personal safety, for example.
It's absolutely true. And just the way how our society is arranged, there are many things children can do that they cannot in other places. Like they can go to school themselves, they can go out with friends, you're not worried. So in many other countries, it won't be possible. And then for mom, it frees your time. So you can pursue your career, you can do social work, become a superstar if you want, right? So you can do like all other things that in other places just would have been much, much harder. If I talk to my friends, like living in Europe, for example, US, I mean, those who are moms, it's a full-time job. So I find here it is just maybe much more comfortable and easier in that head to be also a parent.
That's right. And I think when you grow up in a country or a city that's much more difficult, like in many parts of India, just commuting every day is a challenge. You learn to not complain about things here, right? So you can make out if someone has been living in a different place because you won't complain about the public transport, for example, or the weather because you've had it much more difficult in other places before you came here.
I know. It's like I had this joke with my Singaporean friends when we go out somewhere and they say, oh, there's like a 5 hours traffic jam. 15 minutes is not traffic jam.
Life here is so much more comfortable and it allows you to build networks and communities and frees you up to do travel, which couldn't be as easy in other parts of the world as well. So just life experiences, I suppose.
And so for other women who perhaps going now through a similar situation you have just successfully went through. So when they came here to Singapore, perhaps the trailing spouse, and there's a huge number of women like this here. And then maybe something happened and our family disintegrated and they're trying to reclaim their identity and they choose to stay here in this country. Like what advice would you give them? So what is the easiest way to do that?
I think the thing with Singapore is that you do need to find an avenue to be productive if you want to stay here longer. So even if for me, say, for example, I got the scholarship and I studied. It wasn't what I would have wanted to do, but that's another channel. So find alternative channels I think we have to look at it in the long run, right? Many times it's short-term thinking, but I think in the long run, what thing can you do? 1 or 2 steps that will keep you here in the longer term. What can you either study or where can you intern or who can you partner with? So to look at some things just a little differently from what you're used to doing, I think would go a long way. But also just have your people. That's the most important thing. Have people that love you, that you can trust, that you can leave your kids with if you need to go for work. You need to build that community for yourself.
And for your children, for your daughters, what advice would you like to give to them?
My older one is 16 years old and my younger one is turning 11. And so I often tell them that back at my time when I got married, in Indian culture, you have this it's like a linear trajectory. You study, you get married, you have children. And I'm like, you don't have to do any of that in a linear way. Just make sure that you do enough that you can support yourself, that you don't need another person to be financially supportive of you. You can be your own personal, whatever it is, your personal financial genie. Don't depend on anyone else. That's been my struggle because I was always the second income earner and my husband was always the primary one. So that it is difficult, when the role is reversed, to figure that out, figure it out in the beginning.
A friend of mine, a woman, she helps other women to achieve financial independence. And so when she gives her talks, the opening line when she starts is this. So ladies, a man is not a plan. When I first time heard it, I was like, well, there's a lot of truth in this. And of course, there are different choices and there are many women who maybe choose to be housemakers or second income earners, and that's absolutely fine. It is just hopefully family stays together and then the woman is safe, right? And protected in that sense.
Right,
But then in reality of life also, anything can possibly happen. And then those are really difficult stories and especially financial struggles then for women who have to rebuild their lives.
I had never even opened my own bank account because my ex-husband was in finance and he did all the financial stuff. So at 39, I was opening my own bank account for the first time. And I remember being so scared because I didn't know how to do it. And I was just think back now and it's like, I know it like this. But it's just, I think, overcoming that fear of the unknown, that there's just so many unknowns and we can't possibly hide from it. So just learn step by step. And that's been my journey. Every new thing, there is a fear, and then I just have to push through it, because you will come out on the other side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anu.
Yes,
Has been a pleasure to have
Thank
you
you.
here with us
Thank
on
you.
Yana TV. And one more very important thing, please do subscribe to the channel and share this video. And we also would love to hear your comments. And if you are having a story that is similar to Dr. Anu about coming here maybe as a trailing spouse and maybe going through divorce, or hopefully not, and you just would like to share your story, then please let us know. Maybe we can have a conversation about that.
Okay, thank you for having me.
And I love how we are matching with our colors. I mean, audience might think we coordinated. We actually didn't. So that's the beauty of synchronicity. When we woke up today in the morning, what shall we wear? Let's wear white and lila, very rare color in Singapore. But never mind.